Hello, UK Crime Book Club. I am thrilled. One of my favourite authors is in the chair facing me at the moment, and I love having a chat with you. So, Susan Wilkins, welcome. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the latest book.
Well, thank you, Sam. I'm very glad to be here again. I always like doing these kind of conversations with you because we always end up going into all kinds of interesting nooks and crannies of the writing life. I'm Susan Wilkins. I write mainly psychological thrillers now, although I've written all kinds of different sorts of crime books. I used to be a TV writer for many years. That was my first job as a writer. So I did that for, I have to say, about 25 years. I've been traditionally published, and I'm now operating more as an indie. And can I show you my latest book? Is that?
Please do, yeah, absolutely.
This is my latest book. It's called See Me Fall. It's the fourth in a series. These books can be read as standalones, but there is a cop that goes through all four books called Detective Sergeant Joe Bowden. This book is about Emma, who wakes up in a strange apartment and realizes that something really bad has happened to her. And she goes to her sister, Rachel, for help, because why wouldn't you? And this gets into the whole question of sisters particularly, but there are also two brothers in it. And it's really about sibling rivalry. It's about how the competitive corrosiveness that we sometimes find in families can really, in certain circumstances, get out of hand. So that's where I'm up to at the moment. It's a psychological thriller, and it's out now.
And it's excellent. It's absolutely excellent, even with the difficult subject matter. And I'm just going to say the "Hey Susan" comment we've got is William Shaw. So hello, William.
Oh, hello, William. He's a good friend of mine. Yes.
Well, as usual, his books live above my head here.
Yeah.
I've never met him yet.
Yeah, no, I used to live in Brighton, and William and I used to do quite a lot of events together, but now I live in Devon. He just ignores me, so what can I say?
I finally met him in person last year, and it was very strange because it didn't feel like it was the first time I'd met him.
I think that happens when you've got this interaction online with people. I think that quite a lot of us think that now, because it's in the kind of post-COVID world, it's just become like this, hasn't it? It's just turned into a kind of different kinds of relationships that we have, you know. I mean, the people that I live close to around here in Devon, some of them know that I'm a writer, but most of them think, oh, she's a bit weird. She sort of stays in, and your friends, the people that you can talk to about what you actually do, are in other parts of the country. So it's turned into a very different world, I think, particularly the writing world. So yeah.
In some ways, it's even easier to get support and build friendships now with the online community than it is to meet people in your local area.
Yeah. I do a bit of kind of local stuff. I've done events at the local library, and I'm going to do another thing at Torquay Library kind of this summer. But you know, the number of people who are actually prepared to come out for a live event now, I think it's kind of dwindled. I mean, a few years ago, you would get a good turnout at a bookshop, but I don't know. Since the pandemic, I think people's habits have just changed. And you know, you can actually sit in the comfort of your own home and hear and talk to and even interact with all kinds of other different people, and that's changed people's habits, I think, which is kind of interesting. Raises a lot of other kinds of questions, but there we go.
It does, but it also means it's more accessible to more people as well in some ways, which is a lovely thing. And Sarah Eckford says hello. Hi, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
I absolutely love Torquay. We used to visit quite a lot when I was a child.
Yeah.
You know, once or twice a year, that would be our camping holiday with the trailer tents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Staying in Brixham, visiting Torquay.
Well, Brixham is very close to where I live, and I'll tell you something. That this is a confession. When we last spoke about setting up this particular event, we were talking about how many words I wrote a day, and I told you boldly that mainly I do 2,000 words a day. Well, today I didn't, and I didn't because I went to Brixham. I was actually having a bit of time off, so I was going out to lunch in Brixham, but I had a walk along the harbour wall, breakwater in Brixham.
Lovely.
And it's like it was quite a cold day. You've got a kind of cold north wind coming in, but in the area that's sort of protected by the harbour, we saw a dolphin and a seal playing with each other, just going around in circles and kind of, literally playing with each other. There was no aggression in it. They weren't fighting. It was playing. I did video some of it, and I have actually put it on my Facebook authors page if anybody wants to see it. It's quite hard to video, but just the kind of sheer magic of it. And sometimes I think to myself, we go through our days now, and the stuff that happens in the world can be kind of quite depressing, and you need like a moment of magic like that, and it absolutely kind of lifts everything. So I came home with a big smile on my face and did actually manage to write another 500-700 words, which I didn't think I was going to, because I was feeling a bit lazy today, because I knew that we were going to have a conversation tonight, so I figured I could have some time off. But no, that's my nice story from today.
I love that. I don't ever remember seeing dolphins when I was in Devon.
Yeah, they are quite. We get both porpoises and dolphins, and I'm not an expert, but the people that were looking at this today were saying, oh yes, these are dolphins, because obviously they're bigger. We get quite a lot of schools of porpoises, or would you say porpoise? I don't know, porpoises, who kind of come past. But this was just kind of a lovely little thing today. But anyway, we were going to talk about tropes, weren't we?
We were, because you're excellent with it. I always think, oh, okay, I can see where this is going, and then you flip it.
Right. Well, this book, See Me Fall, has just come out, but I'm sort of very much in the throes of the kind of next book. And I have actually been thinking quite a lot about tropes, because I think when you get, I've now got like four psychological thrillers under my belt, and I'm on to the fifth, and I think, okay, what's the next one going to be about? And some of the tropes are very obvious, and it's very easy to kind of write the same old book. There's pressure on writers to be, to stay in your lane. It's what people expect of you. They love it. It's like, how do you do something that is the same but different? That's true with all, not just books, but TV shows, films, all of that. So it's almost like you want to meet certain expectations, but also bring in something that's kind of different. And I think one of the things I was realizing in the last couple of days was that one of the problems with tropes is that it can lead you off in a very kind of, plot centric direction. So you start with a trope. I mean, for example, this is my first book in the series, She's Gone. And the title sort of says it fairly kind of straightforwardly. It's about someone whose child disappears. Now, we see quite a lot of it. It's a very common trope. The disappearing baby trope is a very common one. I decided to do this a bit differently. What I decided to do was have a kind of older child disappear. Not exactly a child, somebody who was 18. And so the character in this book, Marcia, her daughter goes off to university, and she has the problems of kind of letting go. They grow up, you want them to go, but you kind of don't want them to go. So she has all those problems. But then her daughter completely disappears, and of course she completely freaks out. Now, if you think about this as a kind of common trope, and particularly the ones where it's kind of disappearing babies, I think it's very easy to go down a kind of path where you're thinking about, this is the thing that's going to happen. So why does the child or the baby disappear? Who's taken them? Where have they gone? You know, it leads you down a very plotty kind of route, which is fine up to a point. Obviously, you need plot and you need reveals. But I have to remind myself every time I sit down to write a book that, in a way, you take the trope and then you have to park it up, because it's about characters and it's about journeys. And if you don't have really different characters with different things going on with them, you're just going to get the kind of same old book. And I think quite often you can see things happen on a very sort of surface level of kind of reveals. And I'll give you a good example of this. I was watching a thing on the television the other night. This is not to sort of slag off particularly sort of TV programs, because I used to be a TV writer and I know how difficult it is to kind of keep the audience there. But I don't know if anybody's seen the series that was called Gangs of London.
I haven't seen it.
It's good. The first series was very good, I thought, but quite violent. I mean, if you've got an aversion to blood, don't go there. It's kind of Game of Thrones kind of violent, really. The first series was very interesting because they had a very good set of characters and kind of story. But then they get like a second series, and in the second series, it all becomes completely plot-driven reveals. So this happens, and then they flip that, and the opposite of what you expect happens, and then the opposite, and then the opposite, and then the opposite. And I think when you go down that route and you lose the characters, and this happens quite often in television because the pressure is on to bring out a second series, to do it fast, to get the audience, to get the ratings, and you go for kind of bigger bangs all the time. And I think that really exposes this question of plot and trope to the detriment of kind of character. So quite often my past as a TV writer kind of informs what I kind of do now. So in some ways, because I used to be a TV writer, I think I am quite a plotty writer. But the more books I've written, the more it's become about character. And different characters, and the kind of characters that are maybe not quite in the mainstream, or have problems that are not associated with the tropes, that have layers of contradiction within them.
So how do you think people can move past that? What advice would you give to somebody who's writing and who wants to get that balance right and really wants it to be character driven?
It's a journey. It's an arc. It's there are kind of simple questions that you can ask yourself. So, like the first question is, well, who is this person? What is their ordinary world? What is their ordinary life? What then disrupts that? And what disrupts that is probably about them wanting something. And what people want and what they need usually are two very different things. So the journey that you're going to go on with this character is, you may well end up giving them at the end of the day what they need, which may be the opposite of what they thought they wanted. And it's about change, because all life is about change. The only constant that we know is change. Any other kind of expectation that you have usually is not going to be fulfilled. Well, you're going to die one day, but yet again, that's the kind of, that's part of the whole cycle of change. So all of stories that really resonate with people are about the kind of changes that we need in our lives and we kind of need to understand. And I think the thing about psychological thrillers that interests me, and the more I do them, the more I kind of do get interested in them, in the kind of what is kind of possible with them, is that it's people whose lives are going along in an ordinary kind of way, but then what happens is something that just takes them a little bit too close to the edge. and that's what I was thinking about in this latest book, in See Me Fall. It's about sisters. It's about the relationship between two sisters, but moved into a difficult situation that becomes more and more difficult. And what makes it more and more difficult is how these sisters, in an unconscious way, relate to one another.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say to me, oh my God, you know, what do your kind of siblings think about you writing something like this? And the answer is, I don't actually have any siblings. I am an only child. And one of the reasons that I became fascinated with this particular book is I've spent years watching other people's interactions with their siblings, because to me it feels like a very weird thing. I can't imagine having a person in my life who was in that relationship to me, because I never have. It's always been me on my own. It was me on my own with my parents. I didn't even have any cousins or any kind of other kids of my own age. So I lived in this very adult sort of world where I was watching all the adults and trying to figure out what they were doing and trying to figure out how to please them. And so, but other children and their kind of interactions. And when I first went to school, I had a terrible time because I didn't know how to behave with other children. And back then, there wasn't a lot of kind of nursery school education or anything like that. You just 5 years old, bang, you went to school, and that was that. I knew how to deal with the teachers because I knew how to deal with the adults, but I didn't know how to deal with other children. And so all of these kind of things about kind of nuances of character, I think they all feed into your writer's imagination. So the fact that I'm an only child means I'm fascinated by other people's sibling relationships, which is the source of this book. And I think I could probably say in different ways there's little bits of that in all my books that I've ever written, even though a lot of them kind of contain murder and mayhem and God knows what else. And I assure you, I have never killed anybody or even hurt anybody, I hope. So not in that kind of way. So I think this is all part of a kind of writer's imagination.
Yeah, and I suppose the fact that you've taken so much in is why the characters are so detailed. You would never know from reading it that you were an only child. You would think that you understood it from experience, the intricacies of the relationship, because they are really, Emma and Rachel, they're very different and they're on very different paths. They do have similarities as well. They're both quite driven, even though they maybe don't necessarily always see that in each other. And they do love each other, but Rachel isn't exactly sympathetic. She's to Emma's situation. She doesn't quite believe her.
No.
And I mean, that can't have been an easy thing to write either.
Well, you know, I've long been of the belief that one of the worst pieces of advice that is given to writers is write about what you know. And I'm sorry, but I think it's the opposite. Write about all kinds of things that you don't know. I mean, obviously, what you know is going to inform what you do. That might be the kind of bedrock. But if you always write about what you know, you're going to bore yourself and you're going to bore everyone else, quite frankly. If you are curious and if you go out into the world with a kind of open eye and look at what's going on around you, you know, what you will see all the time is people's interactions. I mean, I'm not talking about, you know, the kind of informational stuff that we all learn. I mean, yeah, we can all go and on the internet and research this or that or the other. All of that is available to us now. But it's observing kind of people's behaviour and people that you don't know and people that you don't necessarily aren't within the kind of ambit of your family. And I'm always have been kind of convinced that the best writers in the world do two things. They use their own emotional range of experiences as a core, and they go out there and look at all the ways in which other people might come back and kind of connect with that. And it's the putting of those two things together that gives you stories that really resonate with people. It's always about curiosity for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good balance. I want to say hello to Donna and Kaz. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
And I've got a child running up and down in front of me, so
Oh, well.
I'm sure she'll be fine for another half an hour. There is something to be said about, as you know, I was the same. I didn't go out much for a very long time. You know, very rarely left the house. And once I did start going out more again, I would say it's just really inspiring to just wander around and look at things and watch people, and even just, you know, walking through a park, the amount of different situations you will see in one small park, different families, friends, people playing games, people arguing, people laughing, and children running around, and dogs everywhere. And it's so inspiring just to actually go outside and look at things if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I haven't done this much in kind of recent years. I don't know if it's kind of laziness or whatever, but I used to travel a lot on public transport, and I used to live in London, and I used to travel on public transport a lot in London. And, you know, the conversations that you overhear are just quite, you know, you get snippets of something and you just think, what is that, you know? Now I live in Devon and go everywhere in a car. It's it's not quite the same, but you know, that possibility is always there. There are so many kind of stories in the world, and our relationship with story is about our relationship with ourselves. We tell stories in order to know who we are and how to understand ourselves. You know, when you're young, everybody goes to stories, and I don't just mean books, because we get stories in a lot of other kind of medium now. But you know, it's always kind of part of your upbringing and your learning to learn the stories of your society and your tribe and your culture. And a lot of those stories are very mythological, and a lot of those stories explain to you how to be a grown-up, or how to treat other people in the world, or you know, they're stories with kind of morals, and they resonate down the ages. So I feel, you know, I feel very lucky to have spent most of my adult life, well, in fact, all of my adult life really, doing what I do. It feels an enormously lucky thing to have kind of happened to me.
Do you ever miss working in TV?
Well, not really, not now. I had a very good career in TV, and I had some great laughs, and it was hard work, and I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot, went a lot of different places, met a lot of different people. Unfortunately for me, what stopped my television career in its tracks was that I got seriously ill. I had cancer, and I realised that if I was going to survive, I wasn't going to manage to have that kind of career anymore. It was too stressful. It was too much, you know, ringing you up on a Friday night saying, can you just rewrite this scene and that scene because this and that has happened? And, you know, the pressure of it was very, very kind of onerous. And when I got ill, I said to myself, well, okay, you know, if I survive this, and and I'm still here, I'll go and live by the sea and write books. And that's what I did. So in one way, there is a very kind of personal relationship with television that came to a halt for reasons within my own life. However, I have to say that I still have a lot of friends who are kind of TV writers, and I think that the writers in TV always were the bottom of the food chain. Your job was to fix everybody else's problems, as well as come up with a good story, as well as come up with, you know, the dialogue, all of that. And I think that because so much money is involved, and it can be such a kind of risk averse industry. I think young writers now get a very rough ride in television. and some of the big TV shows of the sort that I worked on back in the day can be very cutthroat in the way that they treat new writers. Everybody is seen as being very disposable. There's a lot of kind of, you know, power involved in it. You know, who controls the narrative, because it's competition and because it's good money. So I don't kind of miss any of that, but that just I might have got fed up with it anyway. I think I was always, when I was much younger, I was always going to write a novel, but I just never got around to it because I was too busy doing the other thing. It was, you know, next year I'll write my novel, and I never did. Circumstances forced me to take a step back and to do what I've done, and I know I'm very glad. You know, I've got I've lost count. What have I got? 10 novels out now. I think it's 10.
And the novellas as well.
Yeah. I've got 2 short story novellas that I give away to people free if they would like to sign up to my website. You can get them for free. One is about the Devon-based detective thing that I've done a couple of books of, which is about a detective called Megan Thomas, and the other one is called The Shout, and that's about DS Joe Bowden, who appears in these books.
I have just dropped the website link in, so if anybody wants to go to your website, sign up for the newsletter and receive free stories, then that is the way to do it. And as you know, I signed up quite a while ago.
Right, so you did, yes.
I do enjoy the newsletters.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing writing newsletters, because to start with, when I first started, you know, and everybody said, oh, well, if you're, you know, you need to have a newsletter. And I was thinking, well, you know, what am I going to say to people? Because it's a very different kind of writing. But actually, all sorts of things kind of come up. So, you know, I tell people what I've been doing in my writing life. I sometimes tell them about what I've been cooking, sometimes tell them about the music I've been listening to. I always end up recommending TV programs because obviously I watch a lot of TV, and that was my area of specialism. And I get all kinds of emails back from people kind of all over the world. And that's the interesting thing now about being a writer. I mean, this goes on from what we were saying about, you know, what we're doing here and now. You know, you're in Salford, I'm in Brixham, we're having this kind of conversation. But, you know, I get quite a lot of stuff from people in Australia and New Zealand and the States and all over. And that to me is an interesting difference in the kind of writing life. How people in far-flung places respond. You know, obviously it's a huge advantage to be writing in the English language because it is so much a kind of, you know, language of the world. Yeah, I think it's enjoyable.
Well, I'm certainly enjoying reading them. I have to ask, so how far into book 5 are you currently? Not that I'm hurrying you along or anything.
Well, yeah, it should be out. I'm thinking it should be out at the end of May. I think we're going to put it on pre-order soonish. But I haven't spoken to the cover designer yet, so it might depend on kind of what he's up to. I'm about a third or so of the way through, but what I'm doing with this one, it's got, as I said before, the whole question of kind of characters, going with the characters. I think this comes back to the whole question of whether you're a kind of plotter or you're a pantser. And I think those divisions are actually really just a bit kind of, that's not how I see it at all, because you're always going to be building things layer by layer by layer. Excuse me. So in order to work faster, I do try and have quite a detailed kind of outline. So I use Scrivener, and on Scrivener you've got like a cork board on one side of your screen, and you can put, you know, chapter by chapter, this happens, that happens, you know, you can plan it all ahead. So I do that, but then, so I am a plotter in that regard. But once you get the characters up and running, they start doing things and they start interacting with each other and they start bringing things out of themselves. And that has a kind of knock-on effect on kind of what's happening sort of further down the line. So there's always got to be an interaction between the manuscript and the outline, I think. The two have got to sort of serve each other. What I'm doing at the moment is writing my way into the kind of characters. So I'm about a third of the way through of several of the main characters. At the moment, I've got, quite often there is a kind of much more police-focused subplot that goes in there. And I haven't managed to speak to my police advisor at the moment because I've got some questions for him about that. So I'm actually not, so I'm leaving that bit out at the moment. And that is quite a good way to do it in some ways, because you don't get distracted from the kind of character development that you're doing. And then the two things can kind of hook in together, and you quite often find things that come out of the characters as you're going along then give you some impetus to what the kind of police are up to. Because one of the ways in which my books are different from police procedurals, and this is a kind of deliberate choice, is that there is always a kind of protagonist who is not the police officer. The police officer is a police officer who has a kind of story arc and has relationships with her colleagues and things. But what I always wanted to do with her is make her like a proper policewoman, not somebody who's, this is about whether or not you follow the trope. The trope would be, here is DS whatever, and you know, and she becomes involved in this case, which is going to put her in sort of terrible danger and raise more questions than she's ever had to face in her whole life, and everything's in jeopardy, and on we go. And at the end of it, it may be a very good story, and there are some very good books that are written like that. But if you want to have a long-running series, by about, book 3, you say to yourself, well, my goodness, she'd be in rehab or in hospital, or, or just retire through stress. And trying to have a balance between characters who are in crisis, because a story really involves characters being in crisis. So the characters that are in crisis are not necessarily the police officer, and the police officer comes in to deal with the crises that these characters produce. So that gives you a kind of combination of a kind of standalone. All these books can be read totally separately, and having a series that has got a police thread in it. I don't know how much this really, how much readers go, oh, well, we want to know more about Joe Bowden. I do get a bit of that. People say to me, oh, can't you tell us a bit more about Joe Bowden? And I'm a bit tempted to go down that line. And then, and the book after this one, I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe I ought to do a bit more about the cop and what her kind of life is like. But it's quite difficult, because this particular cop, Joe Bowden, I started her off. There's a sort of prequel novel that is called It Should Have Been Me, which I wrote for Pan Macmillan when I was writing for them. And I wrote that very much as a one-off. And that is her life in total crisis. And the series I've got now is post-crisis. She's a sort of survivor of that crisis, and on she goes with her life and her job. So I don't know. I think maybe I need to think about doing something a bit different next time. I don't know. Oh, somebody's saying love the Kaz Phelps books.
Yeah, that is, let me have a look, Terry Thompson.
Well, thank you, Terry. I love the Kaz Phelps book too, and watch this space, because Kaz Phelps is coming back, I think.
Glad to hear it. We have in this book, you have, so Rachel is a police officer as well. She was on a course to go and be level up to Gold Commander, and was pulled away by obviously everything that was happening with her sister. So it's really interesting to see this woman who is used to being in control and taking care of everything and handling things, having this kind of power removed from her. She can't be involved in the investigation because it's about her sister. And then obviously, you know, everything else that happens that I can't say anything about. But it was interesting. What made you choose to do that to her? Because I thought it was a bloody brilliant idea.
I don't know. I really like her as a character, and I'm featuring her a little bit in the next book that I'm writing now, and I think the following book might feature her a bit more because I think there's a bit more story there to be kind of explored.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting to write about characters who've got a huge amount of power and a very set view of the world, and then something happens to completely throw them off kilter. And it's usually the blind spot. Everybody's got a blind spot. And even, you know, very successful, very people who are very good at their jobs, somewhere along the line in there is going to be something that is just not, if you find that spot, that's going to produce a very different set of behaviors, because we behave in different ways in different places. We're different people. I mean, that's what I fundamentally believe. You know, I'm sitting here, I look like a kind of unitary person, but the reality of me is that inside me are a huge amount of kind of cells that are mine, but even more cells that are in my guts that are, you know, other organisms. And that's also true in the way that your personality is in your brain. You know, you're not a kind of single person. Most people are not consistent most of the time. They have personas that they show publicly in a situation like this. They have the way that they are with their kids. They have the way that they are with their partners. They have the way that they are to the person in the shop who serves them. And, you know, normally these all seem to kind of fit together kind of quite well. But when you find the kind of gap, that's when you get something quite kind of interesting. And the character of Rachel Knight in this really interested me, because what I thought about her to start with is, what about somebody who really thinks they know what's going on, thinks they know their job, is really, you know, getting to the top of their profession, thinks they've got everything sussed, thinks they know who they're married to? What if it turns out she was wrong? What would happen? How would she deal with it? Read the book and you'll find out.
It is interesting, going back to something you were saying earlier on, when we meet a character and this character has this fixed idea of what they want. If I get this, and we all do it, if I get this, then that's what will make me happy, or that's what will fix everything, or that's the thing that will change my situation. But it's really interesting when you read a book, because you see that's really not what they thought they wanted, what they thought they needed, doesn't turn out to be the thing that changes their life or makes them happy. Or it's very rare that the thing that they set out for is the thing they end up with in the same way. And I always think that's really interesting to read when you see what we put characters through.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've absolutely put your finger on it there, because it's about the kind of nature of change. Now, you can, in the space of a story, I mean, a lot of my psychological thriller stories happen over a matter of days. I deliberately compress the time in order to give a sense of kind of pace and jeopardy. But if you think about this over a kind of longer span of time, if you think about this over the span of your own lifetime, and all of us are in a similar situation here, depending on how old we are, you know, we may remember a time when things were like this in the world. I mean, for example, when I first started as a writer, I had a big old electric manual kind of typewriter, and computers. When I went to university, the computer was something that filled like the whole of the physics building.
Oh, they were huge.
Yeah, they were huge, and the computing power that was contained in them, I've now got in my one of these.
Yeah.
That's not a change that I could have kind of anticipated. Now, if you'd have asked me as a young person, how do you see your life progressing? What do you need? What do you kind of want in the world? I would have said all sorts of random things, but everything has overtaken me, as it does with everybody. And that's true in the span of a lifetime or in the span of a story. And I think the skill in a story is to compress that kind of trajectory of change into kind of really quite a kind of tight compartment, because that's what creates a page turner, that's what creates pace. You know, most of us, we go on from day to day and week to week, and things do change, but it's a much fortunately it's at a much slower pace. Story takes that and compresses it and presents it in a way that where we get the experience, the emotional roller coaster, the, you know, from chapter to chapter to page, it carries us on. That's why we read the story. So it's taking what is real out there in the world and doing this with it.
How much do you enjoy the freedom of being self-published? You're completely in control of everything, which I imagine must be equal parts scary and liberating. But you get to decide everything. You get to, choose your cover designer. Do you want to show? Have you got all 4 of the books there?
Yes. She's Gone. That's the first one. This is the same cover designer. He's called Nick Castle, and he is very good, actually. That's She's Gone. This is number 2, Her Perfect Husband. This is number 3, Lie, Deny, Repeat. And this is number 4, See Me Fall.
So how much do you enjoy having complete control after years and years of, being run ragged the whole time? And now you get to choose your own pace and choose your own path.
Yeah, I mean, for me at this kind of time in my life and my career, it's absolutely, I'm completely kind of blown away by it, because I've spent a lot of years having to write stories to fit other people's agendas and subjectivities. And I think one of the things that when I first came from television into writing novels, I was very lucky. I got a big book deal with a big publisher, and I was very grateful to have it. But when I look back on that now, I see that as a bit of a trap, because I didn't have enough of a kind of business-like attitude to my own work. I mean, obviously it's about creativity, but it's also a business. And I think what most authors out there don't appreciate is that to the big publishing companies, particularly the big 5, but also some of the smaller kind of indies, some of the digital publishers, you are a content provider for their business plan. That's the bottom line. That's what it's about. And if you provide content that suits their business plan, you can carry on with them. And if you provide content that they don't think suits their business plan anymore, then you get dumped. And I know from my own friendships with a lot of kind of writers across the board, the amount of space there is to see whether a book succeeds or fails now from traditional publishers is very small. a lot of people, a lot of good writers, for reasons that are nothing to do with the quality of their work or how easy they are to work with, are ending up in, you know, very bad situations because of the whole economics of the whole thing. And the economics of the whole thing are that the publishers used to publish books, print them, put them in their warehouse, take them out to Waterstones or the supermarkets or whatever and sell them. And then along came Amazon and blew the whole thing up. And the whole industry is adapting to that. It's trying to adapt to that kind of change. And what has actually happened over the period of the last 10 years, there are, I can't quote you the exact figures, but the Society of Authors and various other, you know, professional organisations have surveyed authors' incomes, and authors' incomes average incomes have been going down, 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 down. Publishers' profits have been going up, up, up. Now, you don't have to be, you know, any kind of sort of raving lefty to say, well, actually, that's not particularly fair. And the reason it's happening is because the kind of chaos, the disruption in the industry is authors are at the end of the food chain again. And however much you have a fantastic editor and a fantastic agent who, you know, tell you, you know, look after you, at the end of the day, their business model is different to what your business model as an author should be. And I'll tell you, it's taken me a long time to realize that I've got to have my own business model of what I want. And that doesn't necessarily mean to say you have to be an indie or be self-published. You can still have a kind of mixture of things. You can have deals with traditional publishers, audio publishers, or whatever. But it really is crucial now for any writer to have their own business plan, which is, what do I want? What are my aims? What am I trying to do? Don't let yourself become flattered, if you like, into just serving the aims of kind of other people. And I think that for cultural reasons, the way that writers are treated, in this goes back a few years, but I still think there's quite a lot of this about, oh, you're the writer, you go off and write your book, we'll worry about this, we'll worry about that. You know, the editor and the agent will get together and have lunch and discuss what your next book deal will be, and you're just, you know, and all of that, I think really writers have got to get a lot more bullshit about the situation, because we will continue to lose out if we don't. And we have been losing out, and the figures prove it. Though I'm not saying indie publishing, self-publishing is the be-all and end-all for everybody. To be quite honest with you, it is hard work, and it's hard to do all the things that you need to do. And you need good help and good advice and all sorts of things. But if you have a fundamental kind of attitude of seeing yourself as a business, then I think you're going to make better decisions all the way along the line. I mean, for example, one thing at the moment, if you get offered if you're lucky enough to get offered a contract by a traditional publisher, one of the things that they're putting in these contracts now is a clause which says covers all kind of forms from now until kind of, you know, forevermore. So it's not just audio books or ebooks. It's kind of, and whatever comes next, so that they will have the rights to publish in whatever kind of, and these sort of things. This is where you should always read your contract and go, well, actually, no, you know, you can have this and this, but not that. Getting a lot more canny about these sorts of things is what all writers need to do, particularly, you know, younger, kind of newer writers. And you can get a huge amount of advice on contracts from the Society of Authors, from the Alliance of Independent Authors. You know, there are professional organisations out there now that will help you. It's not going to cost you money, but it's the mindset. You know, I write these books. These are my books, but this is also my business. And people need to think differently and not not allow, we all, if you're a writer, you want people to like your work, you want to be read, and it's easy to want the kind of approval to go, oh, this agent picked me, I'm so good, or they want to publish my book. All of that is kind of great, but it shouldn't take away your kind of critical thought about, but what is this relationship really going to be about? I'm not saying there aren't some great agents, editors, publishers out there, because they undoubtedly are. But I keep increasingly going on chat rooms with writers groups where there's always somebody going, oh my God, I've been waiting for 2 months for my agent to reply to my email and tell me about my latest book. And my attitude to that is, sack them now.
2 months is
That's
quite
rude.
a while.
There's a lot of that about, because it's like you allow them to place themselves up there and you down here. And actually, no.
I had quite a shock this week with you mentioning bookshops. I went into WH Smith's for the first time in a while.
Right.
And my heart just sank. I mean, my husband was kind of looking at me like, are you okay? I was like, where are all the books? Like, when did that happen? It used to be you'd walk into WH Smith and the whole side wall in the shop that we go in the Trafford Centre, I've not been for, well, obviously a while. I have been reading a lot on Kindle, which obviously for various reasons, I'm reading more physical copies now and not spending as much time on the laptop. But that was all I could. I was walking around thinking, where are all our authors? How many opportunities have now been lost by people? There's just, I mean, Waterstones was, just as full as ever. And it was at the Trafford Centre, so there's no independent bookshop there. There is a new one in Manchester that I've started to visit. I always try and buy something every time I go. And the name of that escapes me. I'll find it and pop it into the group. But that was quite a shock to walk into WH Smith, which I think, just, yes, stationery, cards, magazines, but just no books. The crime and thriller section was very small, and I couldn't get anything that I went in there for.
I think there's been a real kind of narrowing down in bookshops, and that's partly to do with the kind of history of the past, that bookshops categorize things in certain ways. And I think this is where you begin to realize the absolute kind of magnificence, in a way, of the market that has opened up, because a lot of people like to read in particular niches. Well, you walk into your local branch of Watersons and say to them, oh, could you direct me to your steampunk paranormal section? And they'll look at you gone out. They've got fantasy and they've got sci-fi and they've got crime, but there is not that kind of concentration of all these small niches. You go on the internet, you'll find loads of books that fit that particular requirement, if that's your particular requirement. If you look at the whole kind of romance genre, the burgeoning of the subgenres within romance, because of, I think that people don't see enough the opening up of opportunities here. They're still kind of wanting someone to tell them that their book is good, wanting an agent to take them on, wanting someone to kind of do it for them. And I absolutely understand that. When the first novel I wrote, that's absolutely what I wanted, and I was over the moon when I got that. But then you go down the road and you start to think, well, actually, maybe I'm not getting as big a slice of the pie as I would like, and I'm not greedy. I don't want the whole pie. But whereas you've got, big brand names that are that do make a lot of money, they are very few and far between.
Mm.
One of the most interesting stories that I've heard lately, and although I'm sure many people out there in the group will have heard this too, the recent American Department of Justice investigation into the takeover of Simon and Schuster by Penguin Random House.
Right.
They had a kind of hearing where they had like the CEOs of the various companies kind of came in and had to give testimony and were questioned quite a lot. And so this guy, who was, I think, the CEO of Penguin Random House, I think he was that one, he was asked, well, do you know what's going to make a bestseller? And he said, well, no, we've really no idea. And it is completely random. Why do you think our company used to be called Random House? Because nobody knows. And that chimes in with a very famous quote from Hollywood. William Goldman said, nobody knows anything. So, you may, it's a lottery. You may, if you're a crime writer and you get a show on TV, that's going to make you. If you get the marketing spend behind your book that really lifts it off and people like it, that's going to make. And all these people write good books. There are a lot of people who write good books.
Yeah.
But the element of kind of luck and randomness needs to be appreciated. And I think the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now is so I do have more control, so that I'm not going to be disadvantaged because the marketing manager who was great on book 1 happened to get pregnant and go off on maternity leave for book 2, and so the marketing for my second book fell into a hole. These arbitrary things happen. Of course they do. That's part of life. But the more control you have over your own business, then I think the better situation that you're going to be in.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And whichever way, anybody out there who's writing, whichever way you go, just be informed. Ask people.
Be informed. Yeah, be informed. And also recognize your own kind of strengths as these are your assets. These books, it takes a long time to produce a good book. It's your thing, it's your asset. You need to protect it as a business product as much as a piece of kind of creative writing. And having said that, I give stuff away. I do give stuff away. And when I kind of launch my next book, there will be a period of time when I will give the first book, She's Gone, I will give it away for nothing, because that's about relationship with readers. But that's my choice.
Yeah.
My choice to do that. No publisher who's got their particular schedule is going to sort of dictate that. And personally, at this time in my life, I feel better about that. Maybe if I was young and I was starting out, the protection of all this might strike me differently. But I think you get to a certain age where you think, well, I don't really care that much. They can just all take a hike.
Another one of their children has just walked past, and
oh right, okay.
She said to me a while ago, you were talking a little bit before about personas and how we come across in different situations.
Yeah.
And I have I have a full-on Manc accent. I have no issue with that, but apparently when I first started doing the videos, the kids used to giggle and say she's talking in a phone voice again. Now this isn't it. This is just me talking. But that really made me think, am I kind of putting on some sort of persona here? And I don't anymore. I mean, literally what you see is what you get. This is who you'd get if you were sat in my living room having a cup of tea with me. But it did make me laugh that we do kind of put different personas on. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't exactly posh. It wasn't a posh phone voice, but clearly it was made me sound a little bit different in the beginning. So I'm not going back to look at any of the videos. I don't watch myself back at all. Let's have a look who this is from. Jason Chapman. Running a free promotion is a great way to shift a lot of Kindle books in a short space of time. I've recently given a few paperback copies away of a book I'll be releasing in April. Yep, each to their own. It is whatever works, but I would absolutely say to anyone watching, because I've realised we've gone past 8 o'clock, this is how much I've just been happy sat here chatting with you. I would absolutely say go and download the books, order them, however you read your books. There is no right or wrong way to do it. Go and read them. It's a fantastic series, and I cannot wait for book 5.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, and it's great to talk to you. And we've covered a lot of ground today, I think. It's always fun, and I always enjoy it.
And thank you for everyone who's come and watched and commented and asked questions. And I hope you'll all come back when I convince Susan to come back for another interview later in the year.
I look forward to it. And
thank you
everybody
so
for joining us.